The evening air was thick with the weight of summer heat, the kind that made every movement feel slow and heavy. I had just stepped out of the shower, the cool water doing little to chase away the warmth lingering in the room. Wrapping a towel around myself, I moved toward my closet, ready to slip into something comfortable. The house was quiet, the soft hum of the ceiling fan filling the silence. My husband was still at work, and my stepson, Ryan, was supposed to be in his room, lost in one of his video games like he usually was. At least, that's what I thought. Just as I reached for a fresh set of clothes, the door creaked open behind me. My heart skipped a beat. I turned sharply, clutching the towel tighter around me, my breath catching in my throat. Ryan stood there, his eyes wide with surprise, mirroring my own shock. Time seemed to freeze for a moment. Ryan! My voice came out sharper than I intended, laced with a mix of embarrassment and frustration. He looked just as flustered, stepping back immediately, his hands hovering as if he wanted to explain. But words failed him. "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were here," he stammered, his face turning red as he quickly averted his gaze. A rush of thoughts flooded my mind. Had I forgotten to lock the door? Why had he come in without knocking? It was unlike him. He had always been respectful of my space, but something about the way he hesitated at the doorway, his expression shifting from embarrassment to something more complex, left an uneasy feeling in my chest. I turned my back to him, hurriedly grabbing the first thing I could find to wear. "Ryan, you need to knock before coming in," I said, my voice softer now, trying to mask my own discomfort. I know," he mumbled, still lingering in the hallway. I just, I was looking for my charger. I thought maybe Dad left it in here." His excuse felt rushed, flimsy. Something was off, but I wasn't sure what. I took a deep breath, trying to shake the strange tension in the air. This was just a misunderstanding, nothing more. "Your charger isn't here," I told him firmly, regaining my composure. "Next time, make sure to knock." He nodded quickly, retreating down the hall, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I shut the door, leaning against it for a moment, my heartbeat still unsteady. It was such a small moment, yet it unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain. Was I overthinking it? Maybe. But deep down, something about the way Ryan looked at me before he left gnawed at me, like an unanswered question hanging in the air. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. That night, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my chest. I kept replaying the moment over and over. Ryan standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable, his excuse rushed. Maybe I was overthinking it. After all, he was just a teenager, and mistakes happened. But something about the way he hesitated before leaving made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't ignore. Lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, waiting for my husband to come home. The house felt different now, heavier somehow, as if an invisible weight pressed down on me. When I finally heard the front door open, I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. "You're still up?" my husband asked as he walked into the bedroom, setting his bag down. I forced a small smile. "Yeah, just couldn't sleep." He didn't seem to notice the strain in my voice. He was exhausted, like always. Work had been taking up most of his time, and lately, our conversations had become shorter, more routine. I thought about mentioning what had happened with Ryan, but something held me back. Maybe it was the fear of making a big deal out of nothing, or maybe it was because I wasn't sure what I was even feeling about it myself. Over the next few days, I tried to push the moment out of my mind, convincing myself that it had just been an accident. But then little things started to change. I'd catch Ryan watching me from across the room, his gaze lingering just a second too long before looking away. When we passed each other in the hallway, I could feel his presence behind me, his movements slower, more deliberate. It wasn't obvious, not something anyone else would notice, but I did, and it made my skin prickle with unease. One evening, as I was folding laundry in the living room, Ryan walked in and sat on the couch. He wasn't playing on his phone like he usually did. Instead, he just sat there, quiet, as if he was waiting for something. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. He hesitated for a second before shrugging. "Yeah, just bored, I guess." His voice was casual, but there was something else beneath it, something I couldn't quite place. I nodded, folding another shirt, pretending like everything was normal. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Something had shifted between us, and I wasn't sure how to fix it, or if I even wanted to. As the days passed, I couldn't ignore the growing tension in the house. It wasn't something I could put into words, more like an unspoken shift in energy. Ryan was acting differently, and I didn't know whether to chalk it up to normal teenage mood swings or something more. My husband was as busy as ever, barely noticing the small, strange moments that kept happening. And maybe that was what unsettled me the most, the fact that I was the only one who seemed to notice. One afternoon, while cleaning up the kitchen, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, half expecting my husband, but it was Ryan. He stood in the doorway, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "Do you need something?" I asked, keeping my voice even. He hesitated before shaking his head. "No, just wanted to see if you needed help." That was new. He never offered to help, not like this. Something about the way he said it made me uneasy, but I forced a smile. "I'm almost done, but thanks." He didn't move right away. He lingered there for a few more seconds before nodding and walking away. I let out a slow breath, gripping the edge of the counter. I was being paranoid, wasn't I? Reading too much into things? But deep down, I knew this wasn't my imagination. That night, as I lay in bed beside my husband, staring at the ceiling, I realized something. It wasn't just that Ryan had walked in on me that day, it was the way he looked at me after, as if something had shifted inside him, and that thought alone was enough to send a chill through my entire body. The tension in the house became something I could no longer ignore. It was in the way Ryan looked at me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The way he hovered just a little too long when we were alone in a room. I told myself it was nothing, just my mind twisting things, but the feeling wouldn't go away. It followed me like a shadow, making my skin prickle every time I caught him watching me. One evening, my husband called to say he would be working late again. It wasn't unusual, but tonight, the thought of being alone in the house with Ryan made my stomach tighten. I tried to shake it off, to act normal as I made dinner, but the silence between us felt heavier than usual. Ryan sat at the table, barely touching his food, his eyes flickering to me every now and then. "You're not hungry?" I asked, trying to break the silence. He shrugged. "Not really." I nodded, forcing myself to focus on my plate, but I could feel him staring. I stood up to put my dish in the sink, my hands trembling slightly. As I turned, I almost bumped into him. He had gotten up too, standing much closer than I expected. My breath caught in my throat. "Sorry," he said, but he didn't move. I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. "It's okay." I stepped to the side, creating distance between us, but the unease inside me was stronger than ever. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time. I told myself it was just to be cautious, just in case. But as I lay in bed, staring at the door, listening to the faint creaks in the hallway, I knew something was coming, something I wasn't ready for. The house was silent, but my mind wasn't. Every creak, every distant sound made my heart pound harder. I told myself it was nothing, that I was being ridiculous. But the feeling wouldn't leave me. Lying in bed, Staring at the locked door, I tried to push away the unease curling inside me. At some point, exhaustion won. My eyes grew heavy, my body sinking into the mattress. But then, just as sleep was about to pull me under, I heard it, a soft sound, barely there. My breath caught. It wasn't the usual noises of the house settling. It was closer, a shuffle right outside my door. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. Seconds stretched, the silence thick with something I couldn't name. Then the doorknob turned, a slow testing movement. My entire body stiffened. My heart raced so fast I thought it might give me away, thudding loud in the quiet room. I sat up, swallowing down panic. The lock held, but the fact that someone had tried it made my blood run cold. My throat was dry as I forced myself to speak. "Who's there?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. Silence. Then, after a beat, a quiet exhale. "It's me," Ryan's voice whispered through the door. My stomach twisted. I gripped the edge of the blanket, trying to keep my breathing even. "Ryan, what are you doing?" A long pause. Then his voice again, softer this time. I just, I thought I heard something. Wanted to check if you were okay." Lies. I knew it, and he knew I knew. I could feel it, thick in the air between us. I stayed silent, waiting, hoping he would walk away. Finally, after what felt like forever, I heard him shift. The floor creaked, then footsteps retreating down the hall. I let out a breath, my body trembling. Something wasn't right, and now I knew for sure. Whatever this was, whatever had changed between us, it wasn't going away. It was only getting worse. The next morning, I barely touched my coffee. My hands still trembled from the night before, my thoughts tangled in everything that had happened. I needed to talk to my husband, to tell him something wasn't right. But how could I explain it without sounding paranoid? Without proof, it would just seem like I was overreacting. Ryan was quiet at breakfast, barely looking at me, but I could feel the weight of something unspoken between us. The way he shifted in his chair, the way his fingers tapped lightly against the table, it was like he was waiting for something, watching for my reaction. I couldn't do this anymore. I had to put an end to whatever was happening. That night, I made sure my door was locked again, but this time I wasn't just waiting, I was listening. And just as I suspected, the sound came again. Footsteps in the hallway, slow and deliberate. Then the knob turned. But this time, I was ready. I yanked the door open before he could even try to explain himself. Ryan stood there, startled, his face pale under the dim hallway light. "What are you doing?" My voice was sharp, but my heart pounded. His eyes flickered with something, guilt, fear. Then, to my shock, he took a step back. "It's not what you think," he whispered. I stared at him, my pulse racing. "Then tell me what it is." And that's when the real twist came. His lips parted, and the words that fell from his mouth sent a chill down my spine. "I'm not the one who's been trying to get into your room." Everything inside me went still, and suddenly, I wasn't sure who I should be afraid of anymore. My breath caught in my throat as Ryan's words hung in the air. I searched his face, waiting for some sign that he was lying, but all I saw was fear, real, undeniable fear. A shiver ran down my spine. If it wasn't him, then who had been trying to get into my room? A noise echoed down the hallway, faint, but enough to make us both turn. My skin prickled as I realized we weren't alone. My hands clenched into fists, my mind racing. My husband was supposed to be working late, but suddenly I wasn't sure if that was true. Ryan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I thought it was you," he admitted. "That's why I kept watching you. I kept hearing noises at night. I thought, I don't know what I thought." For the first time in days, I saw him differently. not as a threat, but as someone just as confused, just as scared as I was. Summoning all my courage, I turned toward the hallway, my heart hammering. We need to check. Ryan hesitated, then nodded. Together, we moved cautiously toward the sound. My pulse pounded in my ears as I reached for the light switch. The second the hallway lit up, a shadow darted from the corner. My breath hitched. It wasn't my husband. It wasn't Ryan. A raccoon. The tension shattered as the small creature scurried toward the open vent in the wall. Ryan let out a shaky laugh, running a hand through his hair. You've got to be kidding me. Relief flooded through me so fast it left me dizzy. I leaned against the wall, laughing too, though my knees still felt weak. That night, as I locked my door one last time, I realized how much fear could twist reality. Ryan wasn't the problem. My own mind had been the real ghost in the dark.